A very warm good evening to all of you. Welcome to this special edition of India Foundation, which is going to focus on the recently released Budget 2022. We're absolutely thrilled and delighted to have amongst us Shri Jayant Sinha ji. Jayant ji is a senior Indian politician of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He is a two-time Member of Parliament, has earlier served as Minister of State for Finance as well as the Minister of State for Civil Aviation. Jayant ji currently is the Chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance and also member of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Very warm welcome to you, Jayant ji.
Thank you very much for having me, Rajat.
So Jayant ji, we are here to discuss India's budget, which was tabled by our Honorable Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman ji. This budget was projected by the Bharatiya Janata Party as India's Atmanirbhar budget, the India's self-reliant budget. Why do you think it was tagged as the Atmanirbhar budget?
Rajat, this was very much a budget that was building a strong and prosperous India, an Atmanirbhar India. And when we talk about Atmanirbharta, Rajat, what we mean is that we want to build an India that is confident, self-assured, looking to the future with absolute conviction that we can build a strong and prosperous India, an India that is in control of its destiny. That's what we mean when we say Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now this budget demonstrates that thinking very, very clearly. First and most importantly, this is a budget that's focused on sustainable growth going forward. And when we say sustainable growth, we mean that we should be in the medium term, that is over the next 3, 4, 5 years, be able to grow consistently at 6 to 8%. And to grow at 6 to 8%, we have to build the productive capacity of the economy. And therefore this budget very much has emphasized the role of capital expenditure, removing various frictions that are in the economy, ease of doing business, and continuing to strengthen both the corporate sector as well as the MSME sector. So growth is very, very important for Atmanirbharta, and because we've really emphasized capital expenditure, ease of doing business and investment, we are really, I think, poised now for strong sustainable growth in the medium term. So that is the first and perhaps the most important point when it comes to controlling our destiny and becoming Atmanirbhar. The second very important point that is reflected in this budget is the fact that we are focusing on strengthening our capacity in very important manufacturing sectors. These include, for instance, smartphones, it includes solar panels, and by the way, for solar panel manufacturing, there's another 19,500 crores that's been given as a production-linked incentive scheme. It includes advanced chemistry for batteries. So many of these crucial sectors, manufacturing sectors that are vitally important for us as an economy going forward, have got a lot of encouragement through this budget. In total, 14 sectors are being benefited through this production-linked incentive scheme, and over 2 lakh crores of incentives are going to go into these PLI schemes across these 14 sectors. We are expected to create about 60 lakh jobs through these PLI schemes, and in particular there is one PLI scheme that I think should deserve all of our attention, and that's in semiconductors. There's 76,000 crores worth of incentives that have been lined up specially for semiconductors, and the reason for that is that we have to be absolutely able to manufacture semiconductors, which is the heart of electronics, which is the heart of the digital economy, that we need to be able to manufacture in India. If we can't do that, we cannot be confident that we will be in control of our destiny going forward. So that's the second point, that we are really focusing on many of these sectors that are vital for our economy, that will build our strength, that will build prosperity for us. The third area to focus on with respect to Atmanirbharta is defense, and in particular defense production. So again, in this budget, there is an emphasis now that most of our defense requirements should be met through defense production, and that's going up from 58% to 68% in this budget, so that we manufacture the defense equipment and the defense goods that we need in our own country. In addition, final point, Rajat, we are saying that 25% of the R&D for areas such as, for example, drones, that 25% of the defense R&D that's done through DRDO should go to our startups, so that we can build a vibrant startup ecosystem that can serve our defense sector as well. So whether it's defense production or defense innovation, in both areas we are emphasizing Atmanirbharta. And Atmanirbharta is a journey. It's a journey, Rajat, and it will continue. But for India, particularly given the very unsettled global situation we are in right now, it's very, very important for us to be able to control our destiny when it comes to growth, when it comes to these important manufacturing sectors. We are already completely self-reliant when it comes to agriculture and our food supply, but in the manufacturing side we have to be absolutely independent and able to pursue our own destiny, and then finally on the defense side as well.
Excellent. I think you touched upon some very important areas that were outlined in the budget speech. But going into the budget making exercise, I mean, India had come out of 2 years of really bad COVID, struggling into 2 phases and the third Omicron wave as well. Entering into this phase of budget making exercise, what do you think were the top policy priorities before the Prime Minister as well as the Finance Minister?
I think the top policy priorities going into this budget are reflected well in some of the matters that I've highlighted. Obviously, Atmanirbharta was the leitmotif, right, which is the thing that you really want to focus on. It's the overriding priority. So Atmanirbharta absolutely is the overriding priority. I think it was absolutely necessary to provide support to vulnerable populations, which we provided. 80 crore people got free food grains for 19 months. It cost us 2.6 lakh crores to do that, but we did that. We made sure that 170 crore plus doses of vaccine were administered. So now more than 70% of our people have got 2 doses. The people who need booster shots are getting booster shots. So vulnerable populations, whether it is the MSME sector, whether it is farmers, whether it is the poor, all of them have got support, and that has been a very high priority, and that required a lot of assistance last year, and that assistance is going to be continued this year, for example, in things like NREGA. The other very important priority was to continue to strengthen the healthcare sector, which has been done. And third, of course, as I was alluding to earlier, there are vital sectors in our manufacturing economy that needed the support of the PLI schemes, and that has also been provided.
So building on that, the budget speech also sort of ushered us into the Amrit Kal, the next 25 years of India, which will hold a lot of promise for our nation. India will be the beacon of hope for the world. It will be one of the largest and strongest growing economies in the world, and in fact the world looks up to India to carry the burden of the growth for rest of them. Positioning this as a priority goal, what do you think Prime Minister's vision was in terms of this Amrit Kal of 25 years, and how did the budget reflect India's trajectory into these 25 years?
Amrit Kal, I think, is based on 2 absolutely important pillars. The one pillar, which is the ease of doing business, is intended to ensure that India becomes a very, very successful economy, that our corporate sector and our startups do very well, that our MSMEs get the support that they need. And so we have focused on ease of doing business, enabling investment to happen, enabling the growth of our startup ecosystem. So ease of doing business, continuing to support our enterprises is very important for us, and obviously that's one of the pillars. The other pillar is ease of living, as the Honorable Prime Minister says. And for ease of living, obviously we want to be able to roll out these very important welfare programs, for example, support through One Nation, One Ration, through, for example, the Kisan Samman Nidhi, where we are supporting our farmers directly, and also, of course, by building a high-quality, world-class infrastructure so that people living in our cities, people needing to travel from one part of India to another part of India, they have world-class conveniences being able, so that they can easily do all of that, and that really ensures ease of living. So if we focus on ease of doing business on the one hand and ease of living on the other hand, through all of that, our economy will do really, really well, our people will do really, really well, we'll be able to train them and support them, and that will usher in the era of prosperity and a golden era for India, which is what the Honorable Prime Minister has called as our Amrit Kal. From our 75th year of independence to our 100th year of independence, this is a time when many factors are lining up for India, so that India is genuinely in a sweet spot, because our demographics are really excellent, our democracy remains robust. I think a lot of global factors are moving in our direction as well. And so when you add all this up, we are absolutely in a sweet spot, and that's why we think we are moving into this Amrit Kal. And thankfully, now that we have demonstrated that we could deal with a worldwide, once-in-a-century pandemic like COVID and deal with it successfully, I think we are very well poised for Amrit Kal as well.
And I think this is one of the reasons why this budget particularly was less on populist side and more focused around futuristic goals, laying out the foundation for robust growth and sustainable growth out in the future. As you were mentioning about the production linked incentive, I just wanted to understand from you what was going on in the Government of India's mind when they were talking about such futuristic sunrise sectors which so far never got a mention in any of the budgets previously in all of these years. I see that such topics were being discussed which are absolutely at the cutting edge of the startup ecosystem, be it battery swapping, be it a new impetus on climate change, be it impetus around future of finance, crypto, and all of these things. What do you think that such a futuristic sort of a budget, what kind of a position does it take anchoring around the youth of this country?
Rajat, our Honorable Prime Minister is a visionary leader. And as a visionary leader, I think he has very correctly understood that on the one hand, there is this incredible trend towards digitization, where we have to build a digital economy, and we are building a digital economy incredibly successfully. India has the cheapest data rates in the world. 4G is available everywhere. We are moving towards 5G. Everybody has a smartphone, everybody has a computer. We are rolling out BharatNet down to our panchayats. So we are building an incredible digital economy. Our India stack, our healthcare system in terms of seamless billing, seamless claims management, that's really being revitalized and made very strong. And so on the one hand, the digitization of the economy is moving very quickly. And when we think about digitization, we obviously think about very cutting edge technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. We're thinking about quantum computing, which has been referred to in the budgets. We are obviously thinking about drones. We are thinking about really high speed supercomputing capabilities. All of this has found mention in our budgets, and so the digitization of our economy has really been emphasized by our Honorable Prime Minister, is something that's moving very fast. Now, the Honorable Prime Minister has clearly understood that a green transformation of our economy also has to happen. So just as we are digitizing our economy, we have to green our economy as well. And here again, you will see that a number of very visionary steps, important steps have been taken. We are going to ramp up our solar panel manufacturing. We are going to build a completely new type of grid with massive amounts of battery storage. We are going to advance our manufacturing of batteries. We are really looking out for things like solar pumps, which are getting a lot of attention as well. And of course, we are looking at offshore wind and wind supply of many kinds. So whether it is digitizing the economy or greening the economy, both of these two mega trends are going to be extremely important so that India gets to the green frontier. India gets to a point where we are absolutely at the cutting edge of the global economy, and we build a sustainable, competitive economy. And what I like to say is, I like to say Atmanirbhar Bharat, A and B, equals CSR, competitive, sustainable, resilient. So A and B, Atmanirbhar Bharat, is an economy that is a competitive economy, globally competitive. We can compete with the best economies in the world. It's sustainable in terms of the greening that has to happen. And number three, it's resilient so that we can take a shock like the COVID pandemic or like the global financial crisis that we're having, or alternatively even all of the turmoil that's happening because of the situation in Ukraine. These kinds of exogenous external shocks are going to come. We have to build a resilient economy, we have to build a competitive economy, we have to build a sustainable economy. That's Atmanirbharta.
No, absolutely. I think you've been one of the biggest proponents of this green frontier ecosystem which would usher in the next wave of jobs. And coming to the question of jobs, I think youth is one of the biggest stakeholders of this Amrit Kal. It is one of the biggest stakeholders of all of these sunrise sectors that got mentioned in the budget in 2022.
And on that, Rajat, I'll just pause you for a second. We started off by saying that this is an Atmanirbharta budget. It is absolutely an Atmanirbharta budget. But on the other side of the coin, on the flip side, it is also a jobs budget. It is very much a jobs budget. We understand for a young population, we have to create jobs. And that is why people were surprised when they looked at the budget and they said there are 5 state elections coming up. But even though there are 5 state elections coming up, there wasn't even the slightest hint of populism that you would have expected. Why is that? That is because we've emphasized jobs, we've emphasized capital expenditure, we've emphasized those investments in the economy which are going to create jobs. I spoke earlier about the PLI scheme, which is going to create 60 lakh jobs. Our startups, and we have some 80 plus unicorns right now, they are creating jobs very quickly, and we are making things much easier for them. The budget announced that there would be an expert committee set up to look at the startup ecosystem to see what more can be done. Our committee, the Standing Committee on Finance, put out a report a year and a half ago that has been very helpful to the startup ecosystem. A number of important steps were taken then, which are now flowing out through the budget and so on. So we are taking all these different steps, Rajat, to be able to create the jobs. For Atmanirbharta, jobs are very much part of the same story.
No, absolutely. In fact, my question was centered around that, and thank you for answering that. And I think job scene is rapidly evolving. There are sectors which are moving out of favor, and there are new sectors which are coming in. And as you were pointing out, several of these sectors carries the promise of providing lakhs of jobs to our youth. And we should hold tightly, sit tightly, skill ourselves to constantly add greater amount of value in these jobs.
Rajat, our exports have grown to levels that we could never have imagined. So right now our exports are running at a $400 billion run rate. So we are clearly doing something right when it comes to the PLI schemes, when it comes to the policies we've been following in smartphones, in electronics manufacturing, in textiles, in small automotive, two-wheelers and so on. So we are clearly growing our exports because our economy is getting steadily more competitive day by day.
Excellent. So shifting gears and moving to the macroeconomic stability questions. India's fiscal deficit last year was somewhere around 6.5% and 6.8%, and the projected fiscal deficit for this budget is somewhere around the same range. What do you think should be the glide path going forward in terms of having these deficit accounted for in a sustainable manner? Our public debt numbers, which have shot up because of the extra expenditure that the government had to do, and it has risen above 90%. How do you think a proper glide path to bring it down around 70-72% look like?
Rajat, there are two very important aspects to the question you've asked. The first one is that our government has laid out a fiscal glide path. So right now, you're absolutely right, we are at 6.8% going down to 6.4%, but we have said very clearly that we intend to go down to 4.5% over the next 2 or 3 years, and that is consistent with all other countries around the world that have raised spending during the COVID pandemic, when because of the lockdown, economic activity had to be shut down, and that happened throughout the 3 waves that we've had. So this is the time when you have to spend. Every country in the world, every large economy in the world has spent, and for everyone fiscal deficits have gone up. So this was to be expected. This has been correctly applied in terms of the fiscal stimulus, and the government in a very responsible way has laid out a glide path to get down to 4.5% again. And as I said, it's also a question of how you spend, and because we've stayed away from populism, and instead we have focused on capital expenditure, which is much more stimulative to the economy, much higher economic multiplier, the quality of our growth is going to be much better. So that's one part to your question. The second part to your question is also to understand that we have taken this opportunity to clean up India's balance sheet. This is very important. In the past, in the UPA government, for instance, a lot of liabilities were taken off the budget and they were stuck into things like oil bonds, for example, for which we are still paying. Lakhs of crores of spending which should have been in the budget were taken and put into oil bonds so that they would not be in the fiscal deficit, but they actually were a liability on the government. This time, for example, liabilities associated with the Food Corporation of India, which is the money we are spending on the Food Security Act, instead of being taken off the balance sheet, has been incorporated on the balance sheet and included in the budget, which is why some of our deficit numbers have gone up. But this was exactly the right thing to do, because by cleaning up our numbers this way, by being transparent, which the Honorable Finance Minister has done, we are setting the stage for robust, transparent, non-inflationary growth going forward.
In fact, inflation was going to be my next question. Some of the analysts had been saying that some of the strongest headwinds that India is going to face in the next year or so would be A, inflation, B, it would be Fed tightening, and it might throw the markets into a similar kind of a taper tantrum. How do you think budget exercise and not just the speech but the overall budget and India's financial planning takes into account these exogenous factors?
Rajat, global inflation has spiked. It has reached over 7% in the United States. over 5 or 6% in the United Kingdom. It's at rates that have not been seen in mature advanced economies for 40 years. So global inflation has spiked. Obviously, the situation that's developing in the Ukraine has resulted in oil prices going up. They are starting to touch $100 a barrel. And of course, whether it's the economic survey, whether it's the budget speech or the Honorable Prime Minister's comments after the budget, all of them reflect these risks and uncertainties that we are dealing with right now, which is that there is global inflation that of course has started in these advanced economies, and second, that there is a high risk of some of these oil price spikes happening. So these are all risks and uncertainties that we are dealing with. The good news in India is that inflation in India has been absolutely where the RBI would remain comfortable in the RBI's range of between 2 to 6%. So it is in that range. The RBI has done an exemplary job of managing monetary policy through a very difficult time, through very challenging conditions. The rupee remains stable. Our foreign exchange reserves are over $600 billion. And therefore, even while there is all this inflation coming in, this external inflation coming in, we have built up our productive capacity and we have been able to produce as required. Our supply chains are working reasonably well, and therefore inflation in India is much more manageable and much more under control than it is elsewhere. All that being said, Rajat, of course we are facing a very challenging external environment. There are risks and uncertainties aplenty, and we will have to be absolutely vigilant and watchful in terms of how we manage this going forward.
Perfect. So on that note, I just wanted to have your brief sort of comments around cryptocurrency and the future of finance. Since this is seeing global turbulence, I mean there are so much amount of policy work, policy innovation going around. We have seen that even the prices around cryptocurrencies have been going up and down based on various external factors as well. Our budget touched upon taxation of cryptocurrencies to the tune of what ideally a lottery would be taxed at. And also there was talks around the CBDC, India's digital rupee being launched in 2023. I wanted to understand from you, what is the government's and the BJP's vision around this futuristic dimension which is opening up, and where do you see things shaping up in the future?
Rajat, every time a new financial technology comes along, like for example digital payments in the past or now cash flow based lending, these are new financial technologies. You always have to balance innovation with regulation. So our job as policymakers, as regulators, is to make sure that people are knowledgeable about the risks that they're taking, that there aren't any excesses, and that people are protected when they have to deal with new types of innovation. Now, it is very much a fact in India today that millennials in India, young people in India, are very excited about cryptocurrencies, right? So you will see, young people you wouldn't expect to be trading cryptocurrencies to come and ask you questions about cryptocurrencies. That is happening. I just flew back from Ranchi this afternoon, and I was on a flight, and the person sitting next to me asked me about cryptocurrencies, and he was just 24 years old, and I said, have you been buying and selling cryptocurrencies? He says, yeah, I've been buying and selling Bitcoin. So this is clearly something that has caught people's attention, and people are dabbling in cryptocurrencies, and again we have to be very careful to make sure that people know what risks they are undertaking and they do this responsibly. At the same time, please recognize, when it comes to cryptocurrency in India, we have a very unique set of issues as far as cryptocurrency is concerned, which Japan, Singapore, the United Kingdom, the US don't have to deal with, which is that we have capital controls when it comes to our currency. Our currency is managed through the Foreign Exchange Management Act, through FEMA. So we cannot allow free flow of international currencies through India. So we have to be very careful about how all of this develops and progresses from here. In addition to that, there is no global consensus that has yet developed on cryptocurrencies. How should they be regulated? How should they be treated? Should they be treated only as an asset? Should they be treated as more than just an asset? Which are the best use cases? All of this is still developing. There is no global consensus on this. So I think as a result of that, the government has taken a watchful position, a position that's a prudent position, and they've said that there are some good use cases for a sovereign digital currency, which is why that's been announced. The RBI will come out with a digital currency which is going to be controlled and managed by the RBI. And at the same time, when it comes to speculation in crypto tokens, crypto assets, you are going to have to pay tax like you pay tax on any other asset, and you're going to have to provide full and comprehensive records on whatever transactions you've done, and which is why we've imposed the TDS as well. So I think this is a good scheme to have in place right now. We have to continue to see how this evolves and to see what global consensus develops around this. And once that happens, I think India will be at the forefront of taking advantage of this innovation as well.
Jayantji, last question to you. You are a seasoned investor as well. How promising does India's growth trajectory in its near term looks like to you? And what would be the message of to all these global analysts and watchdogs that are looking at India and really eager to understand how is India going to progress into the next few years?
What's going to happen in the capital markets tomorrow, Rajat, I wouldn't be doing what I do. You know, it'll be a much different profession that one would follow. I really can't, guess at all what's going to happen in the short term. In the long term, we know one thing. We know that India's GDP to market capitalization has been over 1 generally, right? So today our GDP is $3 trillion. The market capitalization of India's traded stocks is also about $3 trillion. Now the Indian economy is growing at 6-7% a year in real terms, right? And what that means is that over the next few years, we will have a $5-6-7 trillion economy, right? So when we get to, let's say, a $5 trillion economy and the ratio of GDP to market cap remains as much as it is right now, we are going to go from $3 trillion of market capitalization to $5 trillion of market capitalization. That means over the next few years, and I don't know exactly how this is going to develop, but if historical correlations hold, then we are going to add $2 trillion of wealth to our listed securities. $2 trillion of wealth. That's a tremendous amount of wealth creation on a base which is already very sizable of $3 trillion. So in the long run, it's very, very clear, because the drivers of our economy, demographics, entrepreneurship, innovation, are so strong that as we progress to a $5 trillion economy, we are likely to create $2 trillion of wealth as well. So this is going to be one of the great wealth creation opportunities around the world, and I dare say there will be very few others that can match the scale of what's possible in India.
It was wonderful having you, Jayantji. Thank you so much. It's always such a delight to speak to you and deliberate over these issues which concern India's economic future. Thanks once again.
Thank you very much, Rajat, for having me. Thank you to India Foundation.